You're tuned into the Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast, brought to you by XenoPucks. Here are your hosts, Andy and Brian Matusi.
Welcome to the Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast. Andy and Brian here with you as always. And as always, the show is presented by XenoPucks.
And as always, the show is not released on the day it's supposed to.
Yes, that's the other thing. Just to get this out of the way real quick, I apologize in advance. I'm recovering from an illness from last week. I'm still a little congested, so I do apologize in advance for that. Other than that, though, we got a lot to talk about today. I am still absolutely buzzing from this past weekend with the Stadium Series, but we're going to get into that in a minute. Brian, how you doing, man?
Really good. First thing I want to say before we get into the Stadium Series, because that was the experience of a lifetime. Since we missed last week's show due to various things that kept hurdling us and preventing us from doing the show, we didn't get to talk about the final results of the Four Nations face-off. Obviously, that's come and gone since then. So quickly, we want to congratulate Canada on a very hard-fought win in the tournament and Jordan Binnington for shutting everybody up by having the game of his life in the championship game. Obviously, McDavid picks up the OT winner for Canada. So great tournament all around, a resounding success. I can't wait to have more international play. If that is a preview of what's to come in the next few years, I think we're going to be very spoiled moving forward. So bummed that the U.S. lost, but great tournament all around that the league put on. And yeah, we'd be remiss if we didn't at least make mention of it because we missed our last show.
Yeah, and I will take most of the fault for that. I was sick as a dog last week, and that was the main reason behind us not recording. So apologies for that. Thank you for bearing with us. We're excited to be back. We're excited to get this show underway. Brian, I know we normally hold the Blue Jackets talk for the end of the show, but I feel it is only appropriate for us to start this show with it right now.
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, 100%. I don't think waiting till the end would be the right thing to do given that the magnitude of this game. So right off the top, second largest attended game in NHL history, 94,751 people. Absolutely a blast. The place was electric, probably about a 50-50 crowd split. It might have been a little more Columbus fans than Detroit, but altogether it was a great event. Everybody was having fun. I didn't see anything about people fighting or arguing or screaming at each other in the stands. It just looked like a greatly contested hockey game. The flyover was good. Just there were so many things to love about this game. And yeah, I think we're well within our rights to start the show with this because there was just so much to talk about. We got pictures with the Stanley Cup. Andrew, where do you want to start off with? There's just so much shit that we did in one day.
Dude, I don't even know because like the last 2 weeks of my life have just been consumed by or at least the last 2 weekends have been consumed by the Columbus Blue Jackets. I guess we could start with last weekend. My wife and I went down to Columbus to go to the Blue Jackets game against the Blackhawks. It's always fun watching Columbus beat the Hawks, which they did so quite soundly, I might add. It was a great game all around. Just an incredible fan base to watch a hockey game with. I love Nationwide Arena. It's just one, in my opinion, it's one of the best places to watch a hockey game. I don't want to settle on that too much because that was just a regular hockey game. I really want to focus on this Stadium Series, mainly because you and I were there. I had one of our buddies from back home in Wisconsin came to town with his girlfriend, diehard Detroit Red Wings fans. So it was nice to have that competitiveness within the group, but there was just so much that happened with this. And I mean, from the NHL or the Honda NHL pregame party that we went to across the street from Ohio Stadium, we got to take pictures with the Stanley Cup, which was cool for you because you hadn't seen it in life before until that point. So that was really cool. And it's even cooler because we got to see the actual Stanley Cup, not the one that sits at the Hall of Fame, but the one the players touch. We got to see that. We touched it. It was great. I thought that whole experience was just so well done. I think what they did for the fans was incredible.
Yeah, truthfully, it was. I mean, The only real thing I didn't like about the entire presentation of this, from the pregame party to the little pep rally to the game itself, I wasn't a super big fan of the musical choices. I understand, obviously, they wanted to go with Ohio-based talent, so OAR 21 Pilots, especially with 21 Pilots being straight out of Columbus. Like, I get it, but wasn't overly thrilled about the musical choices. I also wasn't thrilled about the fact that we had to wait forever to find lunch in downtown Columbus.
Yeah.
But that was our own challenge we faced. But the environment was just so good. Everybody was walking around chanting for their team in the downtown area. Everyone had a smile on their face. Everybody was geeked. It was cold as shit, but we all found ways to survive. So it was a lot of fun. Now, one thing I will say I did not like were the prices of the merchandise.
Yeah, dude.
It was so cold. I mean, so they were taking advantage of that, but hats were $40, scarves were $50 at the game. My wife and I were freezing, so we bought a blanket for $65, which is a crime against humanity. But
yeah, I bought that Rob Lowe blanket. So
yeah, Andrew got a blanket that just has the NHL shield on it, which is hilarious.
Yeah, I didn't care, man. My hands were freezing even with the hand warmers. Dude, I was colder there, I think, than I've ever been at Lambeau Field.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
We just cannot stop talking about football on this show.
Yeah, dude, I know. But I do have one thing to say that is negative about the experience, and it's going to piss off any Ohio State fan that listens to this show.
That stadium's a dump.
Yes, it is. That stadium is...
That's rough.
Yeah,
everything was rough about it. The layout of the concessions, the lack of elevators, the how about 5 urinals in the men's bathroom? Are we serious?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's just
the facilities. It's an old building, and I get you can only do so much with the space you have, but the facilities for a school that gets probably millions of dollars a year for its athletic programs, to not touch up their football stadium. I mean, this is a program, again, we are a football show, so we're well within our rights here.
Yeah, okay.
But for a school that just won a national championship, it's pretty sad the state that the stadium's in. And I know they have part of the original stadium still up, the entryway or whatever, with the domed ceiling or whatever, but the rest of the stadium, there's really no excuse for it to be that big of a dump. And it's not a dump like as in it's not clean or whatever. Again, it's just the layout, the lack of
run down
convenient features. Yeah, it's so run down. Just everything. Like I said, I mean, the line to get merchandise intersected with the line to get food. The bathrooms, again, and we were in the upper bowl, mind you, but still, waiting. I've never in my life waited in a line to get in the men's room, which blew my mind. I was in line for like 10 minutes at intermission to go to the bathroom, which is just not acceptable to me. But no, I think you hit it right on the head. The stadium the building itself left a lot to be desired.
Yes. Now I will say the main entrance to that stadium looks so cool. It's original. It's historic. It looks really cool.
It does.
Got to give props there. It looked cool. And how they presented everything, how they decked it out for this game, that was very well done. Everything looked so cool. Just the infrastructure of that stadium is not well kept, we'll say. But I don't want to sit here and brag on their stadium because that's not what we're here for.
That's
but
right.
Just the entire presentation of everything was incredible. I mean, like we said, the NHL pregame I thought was very well done. The C in the Stanley Cup was incredible. The flyover was excellent. They had the Ohio State marching band, which is one of the best marching bands in the country. For those of you who were band geeks like I was when I was in high school, it was really cool to see the Ohio State marching band in person. That's something I could check off my bucket list. I absolutely love that. I thought they sounded great. They played the anthem very well, and the flyover complemented it with the fireworks. I feel like I could go to that stadium and watch any sporting event and be satisfied. A great environment there. And the one thing I liked is there were 2 different fan bases there, and everybody was getting along because everybody was just so juiced to be there. I loved the whole thing. And then on top of all of that, you have the game itself, which was, I don't even have a word to describe how much I loved it. I feel like I don't know that I'll ever have a hockey experience as great as that ever again. That is top of the list for me. I don't know about you personally, but man, I don't know how I can top that.
I've had that was probably a top 1 or 2 experience for me at a hockey game. I would say the only one for me that still tops that was the first Wild game I went to with my wife. It was Marc-Andre Fleury's first game with the Wild. Kirill Kaprizov had 2 goals in the game, including a goal to tie up the game with like a minute to go. Ironically, this game was against the Jackets. And then Jared Spurgeon scored a beautiful overtime winner. And so that being our first experience at Xcel Energy Center was probably still my best hockey experience. But this was either tied with that or a very close second, because the scream I let out when Justin Danforth scored what would eventually be the game-winning goal with 2.5 minutes to go or whatever it was, it was unlike anything I've ever done before. I screamed so loud and pumped my fist so hard. I don't know that I've ever been that excited for a goal, but with that being the case, we should probably talk about the little bit of controversy within the game that happened right leading up to that goal.
I was going to say a goal that in reality, looking back on it, probably shouldn't have counted. Let me rephrase that. That goal should not have counted. So for those of you who may have not seen the game, one, you missed out. But en route to the net to score that goal, Danforth delivers a pretty nasty high stick to Edvinson.
Not even nasty, but it was just blatant.
Yeah, blatant.
Like it's as letter of the law as the call gets. Really, it wasn't a follow through on a shot. It wasn't the Detroit player lifting Danforth's stick into his own face. It was he's trying the sweeping his arm over the head move to get around the defender. And I get what he's trying to do. He's trying to cut around him to get the inside angle so he can break away to the net. But in the process, he catches him, and that should be a high stick, and the refs miss it. And with it being Cam Talbot and net, who couldn't stop a beach ball, 4 goals on 20 shots against. Definitely not the way that you want that game to end if you're a fan of the Red Wings, especially given how good the game was start to finish. It was such a fun, competitive game. Even when the Jackets go up 3-1, the Wings come out in the third period to get the early goal from Kane, and then DeBrincat, who had an incredible game for them, ties it up with 3.5 to go. So not the way you want to see that game end. Unfortunately, as NHL fans, we are not unfamiliar with poor officiating, and Red Wings fans specifically. The Wings have been in the middle of a lot of poorly officiated games the last week or so. Last Saturday against the Wild, that was a nightmare from the officiating crew. Although the Wild were actually on the poor side of the officiating for that. There was a lot of really bad calls that went against the Wild, and they still ended up winning that game. But the Wings have been in the middle of a lot of very poorly officiated games. The Wings and Wild played each other again last Tuesday, and that game was poorly officiated as well. Wings ended up winning that. And then their game on, Thursday night wasn't too bad.
No, and that was against Columbus too. So
yeah, but there was some calls in this one or missed calls in this one that I wasn't crazy about. I actually didn't see the high stick as it happened.
Oh, okay.
I didn't. I was so focused on the puck and seeing where the puck was that I didn't see the high stick. But after he scores it, the refs are standing at the at the timekeeper's table, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Because I'm like, they weren't offside. It wasn't goalie interference, obviously. I'm like, what are they reviewing? Well, then I think it was your buddy that showed me the picture. It was either you or him that showed me the picture of the stick hitting Edvinson in the face. And it's like, oh, Jesus Christ. You take what was otherwise a perfect game to watch as a fan, and then you get the controversy that directly resulted in the game-winning goal.
Well, and here's the thing. Look, you and I were both there rooting for Columbus, and I am ecstatic that Columbus won, even though now it is tainted. The fact of the matter is, when you have a game that has that much on the line, with those teams battling it out for that top wild card spot, Columbus just beat Detroit 2 nights prior to that game. That's a penalty that everybody in that stadium except Brian apparently saw.
Yeah,
so
I'm sorry.
It ultimately leads to a goal. And I've seen so many people the last couple of days since it happened arguing online about it, saying, well, it doesn't matter because Cam Talbot was not on point for Detroit. here's my whole thing on it. Detroit came back and tied that game up. That play happens. That should be penalty happens. You call that penalty. Now Detroit's on the power play with over 2 minutes left in the game. You've got yourself a whole different hockey game, and that changes everything. And I saw a couple of instances where people were like, well, Edvinsson kind of sold it. Okay, maybe he did. I don't necessarily agree with that.
It's still a high stick.
It's still a high stick. And if you think he really sold it that bad, fine, call it embellishment too. But ultimately, on a penalty that obvious, you need to be calling it in a game on this scale on a stage like this. And so now this win is going to be forever tainted, and there's always going to be controversy around this game. Again, I'm happy with the outcome that Columbus won. That's what I wanted to see. But I think if you're a Detroit fan, you're pissed off right now, and rightfully so, because I do wholeheartedly believe they got screwed on that call. And again, four goals on 20 shots is not good for any goaltender. I get it. And you have Elvis on the other end of the ice who made, 43 saves?
Yeah.
Unreal.
Yeah. Can we just, I mean, again, I know Talbot was bad for the Wings, and I know the missed call was bad. Can we talk about the fact that that game would have probably been like 6-1 if
Detroit.
Elvis Merzlikins was not in net? He had an outstanding game. He was brilliant. Even the tying goal, I'm like, look, I didn't think it was, it was a great shot by DeBrincat, but I wasn't crazy about how he looked on that goal. But I'm like, before that, he faced over 40 shots. I'm like, the guy's got to be out of gas. Right. And not only that, they were really getting pressured in the third period. So him letting in a couple in the third, overall, he was great. He kept them in that the whole way until they finally broke it open and got that 3-1 lead. He is the only reason. I mean, yes, the missed call resulted in the game-winning goal, but they wouldn't even have been in that situation if not for Merzlikins' outstanding play.
I was gonna say, for the majority of that game, most of that game, other than what the score sheet shows, that game was mostly Detroit. Like Detroit was all over Columbus that whole game, and there's no
shots
question.
For 46-21 in favor of the Red Wings.
Yeah, so there's my point right there. And then again, you have Cam Talbot on the other side, and that's just a rough performance. Elvis really stood on his head for them when they needed him to, and I think it's worth noting that in every goal that Cam Talbot let in that game was soft.
The power play
the
goal,
Voronkov goal was good.
The Olivier goal, that's one he definitely wants back. He was really late getting to his post. Olivier really didn't put much on that little chip in. And the Danforth goal, you got up after he absolutely stuffs them on the first shot attempt. You got to cover that puck up. But again, I want to go back real quick to the officiating. The officials for this game, the referees, are Kendrick Nicholson and Francis Chiron. Now, Kendrick Nicholson has done over 500 games in the NHL. He's been around a while. Francis Chiron's done over 700 games. He's done 90 playoff games, including 2 Stanley Cup finals. This is one of the most experienced officials in the league. I don't know if he was the closer ref of the two when this call was missed, but for either of these guys to have over 500 games of officiating under their belts, and to miss that call was pretty bad.
I agree. And
with 4 officials, because he's already bad enough.
With all 4 officials on the ice, though, you've got to get together after that. Somebody saw that. Like, I'm sorry, you've got to get together and be like, okay, what are we gonna do here? Because if the problem is
there's nothing they can do by the rules of the game, though. They can't call it. They can't review for a missed penalty unless it's like a goalie interference.
I understand that. It's really frustrating, and I feel for Detroit fans because I'm not one of those toxic fans that's just like, screw you, suck it up. Like, no, that legitimately that missed call cost them the game, and not to say Columbus still wouldn't have come out on top. But Detroit had come back and tied that game up. And again, you call that penalty, now they're on the power play. So you have a whole different hockey game there. It's just, you hate to see it end like that. But I think overall, other than that, I think the whole thing was a massive success. I loved every second of that, minus freezing my ass off.
Yep.
So
yeah, the freezing part wasn't great, but the game itself was overall was good. I mean, I hate that one bad call could take away so much from this game. I bet, but it at least has to be mentioned that was a brutal missed call from a veteran officiating crew too.
Yeah, that's a tough look. But now if you're Detroit too, you're coming off back-to-back losses to Columbus.
I think they have one win in like their last 4 or 5
Yeah,
games.
and I mean, I'd be interested to be a fly on the wall in the locker room with Todd McClellan post game there. Aside from hearing what he has to say about the missed call, I think everybody with a brain is on the same page with that high stick.
Yeah.
But if you're Detroit, where are you going from here? What do you have to do? Because now you're down in a second wild card spot. You're coming off back-to-back losses to the same team. What adjustments do you make from here?
Well, exactly. And look, the team is good enough on paper to get the job done. I really hope with the deadline being this week, and we're going to talk about the trade deadline in a minute, I really hope Detroit is able to find a way to go out and find a goalie, because Lyon is an acceptable backup. Cam Talbot, I don't think, is an NHL goalie. When the Wild chose to keep Marc-Andre Fleury over Talbot, I was actually surprised to see him stay in the NHL. He had a couple really great seasons, and that's okay. And not everybody's a 20-year Hall of Famer goalie, but ultimately Detroit, this is a team that's good enough to do some damage if they can get into the playoffs, but they need to have a good goalie. And we've had plenty of conversations before about teams that they're just missing goaltending, and it's much easier said than done to just get a good goalie. And I know Detroit's got a goalie in their system right now, Sebastian Kosa, I think is his name, that they're really, really high on him, and they're really trying to develop him and be patient with him so he can develop and be their goalie of the future. But right now you have a team that's pretty good and is missing. The only thing they're really missing is league average goaltending, or slight, above average league or above average goaltending. Sorry. Let me pull out Talbot's stats right now as we do this. But again, Talbot, he just hasn't been great. His save percentage on the season is a .903, which isn't the worst. It's still not at league average, though. His .292 goals against average is on the higher side of things. So his last few games, he's given up quite a bit of goals, though. And for his career .913 save percentage, like not a bad goalie. But let's look at Talbot's last 5 games here. His last one against Columbus on Saturday, again, gives up 4 goals. Against Columbus on Thursday, gave up 4 goals. Only allows 2 goals in a game against the Wild on Tuesday, but then on the game last Saturday, he allows 4 goals in a game they lost, and then got yanked in a 6-3 loss to Tampa. So it's, I don't know, it's kind of tough to defend this guy when when he's been just not good enough ultimately.
Right. Well, and I mean, when the rest of the team's rolling too,
that's the thing.
They're
what are they? I think they're like the top penalty kill in the league, and they're one of the best power plays. So
yeah, Detroit's not a team to sleep on. Like that's worth mentioning.
They're dangerous, and they have guys that they have good. First of all, Moritz Seider is one of the best defenders in the league.
Correct.
But I mean, you have offensive firepower. Kane and DeBrincat being your shooting options on the power play is just unbelievable. And Larkin's still there, and he's a great skater. Their captain, he's a fantastic player. They have a good team. Like, they have a good enough team. McClellan, he's not everybody's cup of tea, but he's an effective enough coach that even if he doesn't have a bunch of championships to his name, is a guy that can get a lot out of these players. And if they can get a good goalie, they can do some damage. That's why all those Todd McClellan Sharks teams were good. They actually had goaltending, though.
Yeah, part of me is like I've always liked the Red Wings. Like, I'm not a Red Wings fan, but I like the Red Wings. And that was one of my favorite things about this Stadium Series game, was getting to be around all these Red Wings fans. It's just such an incredible fan base. Both teams have great fan bases. But you feel for the fans, especially such a historic team, and to watch them struggle when they shouldn't be struggling. It's just sad's not the word I want to use. It's upsetting. It's frustrating. There we go. I don't want to watch a team struggle when what's causing their struggles right now is goaltending. And I think they're one goalie away from making a deep run. So
I don't know
like
about a deep run, but they can at least
a good
get into the
run.
playoffs and make some noise.
Yeah. So I'm telling you, man, I think if they get a good or a decent goalie, I think they could make a deep run. They're a good team, man. They are a great team. So
they just have to double down though and go for it. I mean, right now the Ottawa's breathing down their neck. The Bruins, who have not been good, are not far behind though. Still, I mean, they're if Jeremy Swayman gets super hot for the Bruins, all of a sudden, even though McAvoy's probably done for the year, Lindholm's out, Marchand's out, Frederick's out, and it sounds like he may be gone by the deadline. Like they're not, the Bruins aren't in it probably going to be any dangerous team in the playoffs, but they could, if Jeremy Swayman gets hot, they can still make it and pass Detroit and pass Ottawa. And now with Columbus winning these 2 games against Detroit, they're ahead of them in the wild card race. Without anybody having games in hand, all of a sudden Detroit's got a big decision to make here. So I don't know. Well, it'll be interesting to see where they go. But
again, I didn't mean to turn that into what should Detroit do? But
well, with that in mind, should we start talking about the trade deadline now? Because it is in 4 days.
I think we should. I just real quick want to say a thank you to the NHL for an incredible experience with the Stadium Series, and I hope that's something that we get to experience again. There's just nothing like it. And if you listen to the show and you ever have that opportunity, I'm telling you, jump on it. There's absolutely nothing like it. It was from start to finish, not even just the game, the entire full day experience was terrific. So job well done. Moving on.
All right. So with the trade deadline being this week, let's take kind of a brief look at the standings. We're not going to do a breakdown for each team as we just simply don't have the time and resources to go through this team by team, but a couple of teams that we should focus on as these playoff races heat up. First of all, let's look at the Atlantic and the fact that the top 3 teams, Toronto, Florida, and Tampa Bay, are all on heaters. Toronto and the Panthers, both 8-2 in their last 10. Toronto winners of 5 straight. The Panthers winners of 3 straight. Tampa Bay behind both of them, but has won 8 in a row. They're 9-0-1 in their last 10. They've been on an absolute fucking roll. Really, none of these teams need to add anything. I know the Maple Leafs are probably after a centerman, which is what they could really need. They need better centers. They need guys that can win faceoffs for them. They really need a 3C behind Tavares, or they need a 2C so they can move him down to 3C. The Panthers just added some defensive depth, picking up Seth Jones from the Blackhawks, sending Spencer Knight the other way. It's a good trade for the Panthers as they bolster their roster. But now, with how good that team is, and I know Kachuk's done for the regular season anyways, so now that gives them more room to add another weapon at the deadline. But the Panthers are a team that's well constructed enough that if they don't do anything else, they'll be fine. And the Bolts are kind of in the same spot too. Like, this is a really loaded up team. I don't know how much space they have at this exact second, but again, anything they add will only make them better. Clearly, this team is constructed to win. They've done it in the past, and now they're getting hot, so watch out.
Yeah, I back to the Seth Jones trade. I think it is a good move for Florida. I think he's going to grind on the power play, and I think he's just going to absolutely grind on that team. And I've seen people on the other side of it saying, well, good, Florida can have him because he sucked in Chicago. That's true to an extent, but I'm a firm believer of you're a product of your environment. So
yeah, I'll say, I mean, Seth Jones, his whole career in Nashville and in Columbus, was an outstanding player, and has only really faltered with Chicago and how bad they are. And I think part of it was he just didn't want to play there anymore after they didn't make him captain when he said he wanted to be. I think that was kind of the beginning of the end for them.
Right. And on the other side of that trade, I think Spencer Knight's actually a good pickup for Chicago too. A team amongst its many problems that it has, they do need a goaltender because Peter Mrazek, that ain't it.
Not it, and neither is Soderblom. I think they were hoping to get a lot more out of Soderblom, and it is just not panned out.
Correct. And sometimes that just happens. It's the way of the business. But I think Spencer Knight's a good pickup for them. He's a good, promising young goalie. I think as long as he can stay healthy and keep his mind right, I think he'll be a good fit there. I do wish him well there. Obviously, Chicago has many other things they need to get figured out, but I think picking up Spencer Knight's good for them. As a result, now the Panthers brought up Chris Driedger from the minors, who has played for them before in the past and has been a pretty, what I would say, reliable backup for them. So we'll see if he can stick to that now behind Bobrovsky. We'll see how that goes for them. But overall, I like this trade as a whole for both teams.
All right. And then looking at a couple of teams in the Atlantic that could still theoretically get in, obviously Detroit, we talked about their big thing they're going to look to get as a goaltender, or that they should look to get as a goaltender, excuse me. Other than that, the team on paper, again, you don't want to sell the farm trying to grasp at a playoff spot. And I don't think Steve Yzerman's greedy enough to reach for something that's not there. But I do think, like if John Gibson's willing to go there, can you make something work and get a goalie that's serviceable? I know Gibson's health is obviously always a big question, but again, anything will be better than Cam Talbot for them at this point. Ottawa in a kind of a unique, or not a unique situation, but a weird spot. It feels like the team on paper is pretty complete, but the results just don't seem to be there. And so now it's like, okay, what does Ottawa even do at the deadline? Do they do anything? Do they think they're good enough where they can keep going? Again, similar to like I mentioned with Boston, where if Jeremy Swayman gets hot, the Bruins could sneak in. Well, if Linus Ullmark can turn the heat up there, I don't think he's on the injured list right now for them, and I should have checked before we started recording, but I didn't. But again, if he can get hot enough, Ottawa can climb into that playoff spot and get in. So, what do you do if you're Ottawa? It's kind of a weird spot that the Sens are in now too.
Right. So, excuse me, there goes my voice doing that. Cool,
I was going to say, I'm sure everybody enjoyed you doing that into their ears.
Sorry, folks.
So I'll be really interested to see. I think Boston's going to sell off now. I think Don Sweeney I don't even think Sweeney's stupid enough to think that they have a fighting chance in the playoffs. So I would assume a yard sale is coming in Boston before too long, as far as their pending UFAs go, especially with McAvoy being done for the year. It looks like I don't see them trying to go for something that they just don't have a chance. I mean, they'll just get annihilated in the playoffs. Elias Lindholm hasn't had a great season. Zadorov is kind of underdelivered. But seeing what the Sens and the Red Wings do will be very interesting as we move forward. Looking at the Metropolitan Division, let's look at the top three teams there: Washington, Carolina, and New Jersey. Excuse me. The Capitals have just been. We've talked about it at length, how exciting they've been to watch this season. Again, kind of a team that feels very complete, which kind of came out of nowhere, but the additions of Dubois and Thompson have proven to be a large difference in the structure of this team, plus the outstanding play of Jacob Chikrin, the fact that Alex Ovechkin is scoring at a historic pace at 39 years old. Everything is clicked for the Capitals, so I don't know that they really need to do too much more to add to the team, but again, any depth they can add will certainly help, especially when you consider what injuries and stuff can happen down the road and into the playoffs. So I don't know that there's much there for the Caps to do. The big one for me is the Hurricanes, as I've frequently dogged on them on this show. I never take them seriously now. And until they make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, I'm not going to take them seriously. And for the Canes right now, they went big game hunting. They got Mikko Rantanen, but right now there's no talks of an extension. And now there's is he going to get moved out because they won't be able to get a deal done? Should they just keep him for the stretch run, even if he's not going to resign? That's the biggest thing facing the Canes right now. I still think they need a goaltender badly. Because I just don't see it with Freddie Anderson. I truly do not see it working with him. He's just never healthy enough.
Freddie Anderson's had his chance in the NHL, and I'm not knocking the guy because when he's healthy, he's a good goaltender, but it's just...
He's not good enough to get you over the hump. He's
correct.
0 for 3 or 0 for 4 in the conference final appearances now. It's enough if you include his first stint with the Blackhawks, Jesus. You include his stint with Anaheim, sorry. That conference final loss was to the Blackhawks, was what I was going to say. But yeah, and with the Canes, it's just not been good. He's not been good enough. It's as simple as that. And ultimately, that's the big thing that they're going to be hung up on. Again, they add Rantanen and now they can score, or they really haven't scored well with him. And the big thing that's going to haunt them in the playoffs is are they going to be able to score? And I mean, we know they can defend. One of the best defensive teams in the league. We know their structure is good, but you need those elite scorers in the playoffs, and they just don't ever get it. And so now I wonder, again, they can't get Rantanen re-signed, but you cannot give up an asset like that when he's the only guy on your team capable of super high scoring.
I don't disagree with you. My thing is, obviously the big thing here is you have to get him signed. It's a complete waste if you don't. But my thing is, if they ship him out now already before the trade deadline, the team's a joke in my book at that point. You're not committed to winning at this point, and I still, like you said, you won't be convinced until they make the Stanley Cup final. I myself am not convinced that they're capable of winning anything. So, and I won't be until they do win the cup. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see. So let's say right now, do you think Rantanen's gone at or before the trade deadline?
I hope not. Look, first of all, some of the teams they're talking about him going to, I'm like, yeah, keep him the fuck out of the Western Conference. But, Carolina, look, even if you don't think you can get him to resign, he's one of the best scoring players in the league. This is probably your last good chance to do this with this group, I feel like. Because at a certain point, you got to cut your losses and be like, okay, we're not going to win it with this group and with Brendan Moore as the coach. Obviously, there's a disconnect here. You got to take one last stab at it with the best scorer you've had in generations. So I don't think he moves, and I certainly don't. I hope he doesn't move, because if they're ever going to prove me wrong and make me look like an idiot, they're going to need him to do it.
Yeah. We'll see what happens, man.
All right. Third team in the Metro, the New Jersey Devils. So they get Jake Markstrom back from injury last night. Tough loss to Vegas, 2-0. Vegas actually with a really good game. Jack Eichel with an outstanding game last night. I know he had the collision into the boards, and the name is escaping me now who he crashed into the boards with. It was kind of a scary moment, but Markstrom gets his first game action since the end of January. He has a good game, 22 stops on 24 shots. Obviously, if he's healthy, the Devils have a great chance to go deep in the playoffs. Not the best team on paper in the league. I know we've really kind of pumped up their tires at the start of the season. Obviously, there's talent there on the back end and with the forward group. I know the Jonas Siegenthaler injury is going to hurt a little bit. I don't know how long he's out for, but this is a really skilled group. When Jack Hughes is at the top of his game, he's great. Nico Hischier's great. Jesper Bratt's great. Timo Meier. This is a team full of very good players. And so with Markstrom, when he's on his game, is one of the best goalies in the league. This is a team that I think is very capable. This will probably be one of my dark horses on my playoff bracket, because this is a team that could really do some damage to a team that's not ready for it. And if they get in, if the standings stay as they are now, their first round matchup would be against Carolina, and that would be a hell of a series.
Absolutely. And, I think, like you said, they're kind of a sleeping giant. And I still think this isn't a team to sleep on. I think Sheldon Keefe has done a great job this year since taking over. I think a change of scenery was good for him. And I think him coming in has been nothing but good for New Jersey themselves. I think once playoff time rolls around, if they stay where they are, their position in the standings isn't going to be a reflection of how they're going to perform going into the playoffs. I think this is a team that's very capable of dominating their way through the playoffs if everybody stays healthy and on their game.
Yep. Yeah, no, definitely. Honestly, Jack Hughes kind of really had a tough time at the Four Nations tournament. But I think he can rebound and really pick it up in time for the playoffs. Again, the regular season, none of the stuff matters once you get into the playoffs, but
correct.
You'd like to see quite a bit more out of Jack Hughes, given that he started last season on like a 3-point a game pace before the injury, which still makes me sad because I really think we might have been in for a historic season last year with Jack Hughes. I'm not saying he would have, scored 190 points or whatever, but he might, he could have had 150, 160 last year easily just because of how hot he started. But we'll move on from there, just knowing that the Devils, again, a team in a great spot that could do a lot of damage. Markstrom had about a month and a half to recover from his injury, and now he looks primed and ready to go. Again, even though our Devils lose that game to Vegas, Markstrom still looked outstanding in it. So we kind of already mentioned the Jackets in some capacity here, but given the structuring of the team, again, not wanting to mortgage the future too much, they kind of have a thinned out prospect pool now. A lot of their best players are now with the big club, a lot of their best prospects. So obviously with their goaltending situation, they seem pretty content on staying with Elvis and Tarasov going forward. And, if Elvis puts up more games like he had in the Stadium Series, I think he won't have to worry about going anywhere. But The Jackets, look, if they're going to get into the playoffs and do any damage, I think they're going to need to go out at the deadline and find some kind of center depth to help them. I think you can never be too deep at center. And for the Jackets, they have the scoring threats. They have the Marchenkos and the Voronkovs, and Luka Del Belbaluz, when he's been with the big club, has been good. JVR's had a lot of great games. Monahan, when he comes back from injury, will be a very effective player. Boone Jenner being back from injury is a huge help. They have weapons, and again, any team that makes it into the playoffs theoretically can win the Stanley Cup. But for the Jackets, the lack of center depth is the thing that concerns me. Obviously, on the back end, all their defenders are having pretty good seasons. Werenski is having a Norris season. I think he's pretty much a lock for it at this point. He's just been unbelievably good this year. But for the Jackets, I don't have any super high expectations. I'm thrilled that they are where they are and that we can even have this conversation about a potential playoff run for them. But now that they're in this spot, it's like, what can you do to help solidify your roster again without mortgaging the future? Because the future of this team does look extremely bright. Now that since Don Waddell's got his hands on this team, almost everything has gone their way.
Yeah.
So you don't want to throw it away. And Don Waddell's not the kind of GM that's going to just, throw it in the garbage for a chance at a playoff spot. But again, you're still dealing with the Monahan injury, and knowing that face-off wins and possession are going to be so important in the playoffs. Who can you go out and get? And there's going to be a couple good center options out there, and I'll just be interested to see how they handle it. By the way, real quick to go back to the Stadium Series game, Matthew Olivier is just the best teammate I think anybody could ever ask for. Man, is he just tough as nails. I mean, everybody knows he's a great fighter, but man, is he just a good hockey player. He's got a very slight scoring touch, but his physical edge to the game is just unmatched. He's a really gifted skater, I think, and obviously he can throw hits and he can fight, but he just does it all. He's a big energy guy. Like, he's exactly the kind of guy you want on your team. So I loved when he was in Milwaukee with the Admirals and watching him play, and I love that he's making a big name for himself in the NHL. And for a guy that's essentially a bottom six player just based on the kind of game he plays, I think he's going to be due for a big contract.
Brian's like, he's a bottom six player, but he's top six in our hearts.
That's right. He's bottom six in the lineup, but top one in my heart.
Hey, man, I love watching him play. He's so fun to watch.
No, he brings the party every single time. So, but again, for the Jackets, as it relates to the trade deadline going forward, I think the only thing they really should go after if they make any moves, just more center depth and see what's out there. Again, don't gamble the farm just for a shot at a playoff run. The future is clearly very bright for this team. But let's just not mortgage the future here.
I'm right there with you. And I also think once they bring Luka Del Belbaluz back up from Cleveland, I think that'll be a good move for them as far as offense goes. He was maintaining himself very well before they sent him down for the Four Nations break. But he's definitely, in my opinion, a guy that belongs with the big club. So I think that'll be a good move for them as well. And again, I know you and I aren't a big fan of the Elvis Tarasov tandem, but it looks like that's just what we're going to have moving forward. And at this point, fine. They're doing okay. Like you mentioned earlier, this is a team that's not even supposed to be in the position they're in right now. We shouldn't even be having this conversation. And with everything this team has been through, starting the season off with the loss of Johnny, I mean,
I'm thrilled they're here right now.
Yeah, exactly. I think everybody is. I think if you're a hockey fan, that you're thrilled that they're in this position right now. It's such a Hollywood story. Do I think they're cup contenders? No, but the fact that they're where they are now compared to how they were last season is just incredible. And I do have to say a lot of that credit does go to Don Waddell. And I think Dean Evanson's actually been a really good fit there. And that's saying a lot coming from me because I've never been a huge fan of him as a coach, but I think he fits right in Columbus.
Yep, definitely. It is worth mentioning that the Rangers are breathing down the Blue Jackets' neck. So the Jackets are going to have a really solid finish to this season. Because even though I know the Rangers have, obviously they offload Trouba earlier in the season. Now they make the Ryan Lindgren trade and send him over to the Avalanche. And so Jimmy Vesey goes over to Colorado in that deal too. And we'll get to the Avs in a little bit when we talk about the Western Conference. But yeah, first of all, that was a big trade too. And what's funny is that that almost missed my show notes, so that would have been bad if I didn't mention that. But I know the Rangers.
If we didn't talk about Colorado.
That's right. Well, in this case, we kind of have to. Yeah. But the big trade. And again, I know New York's offloaded some guys, but there's still plenty of good talent there. I know the team's underperformed, but again, with a world-class goalie like they have, if he heats back up, they're right back in this. And so the play of Columbus is going to be, every point is going to be so important for them moving forward. They got the Red Wings chasing them. They have the Rangers chasing them. They have to be great the rest of the way. And they've been very good so far. It's just, they can't slip up because now there's too many teams chasing them. So be interested to see where it goes for the Rangers. I really don't think there's much they need to add at this point. It seems like they're kind of content with the group they have now and just finishing out the season however they may have to. But we'll see. Again, the Rangers are a team where if they squeak into the playoffs, they're a dark horse too, because that's a team with a goalie who, if he gets hot, he's one of the best goalies in the league.
Correct. And like you mentioned earlier, it doesn't, once the playoffs roll around, once you're in the playoffs, everything that happened in the regular season does not matter anymore. It's anybody's game at that point. So it's just one of those kind of things where you just kind of sit back and watch and see what happens and let nature run its course.
Yeah, 100%. Real quick, before we get to the Western Conference, we kind of just glanced over the Capitals. Again, I don't feel like there's too much they need to do because they've just been so good that it's, it doesn't feel like there's many moves they need to make. But let's mention the fact that Alex Ovechkin is 10 goals from tying Wayne Gretzky's record. He is 11 goals away from breaking it. We are very, very close to witnessing a record breaking that was once thought to be impossible.
And, one thing I want to say about that is all the OV haters out there, which the fact that that's even a term is absolute insanity to me. But all the OV haters out there saying, well, look how long he had to play. He's doing it in literally the same exact time frame that Wayne Gretzky did it. If you look at the years they've been in the league.
I know Gretzky didn't start in the NHL until he was either 19 or 20, but Ovi missed his first season because of a lockout. He missed part of the 2012-13 season because of the lockout there, and then he had a COVID shortened season. So I'm not here for any of this crap that he's had more time. Look,
correct.
I know he'll end up playing more games in his career, probably, sure, but
it's not like he had a Yager career, though. It's not like he played for 104 years and then
precisely. In fact, I'm going to pull up Wayne Gretzky's career stats because I don't know how many games played he has for his career.
I would say I'm curious to know the exact numbers because I know it's got to be somewhat close.
So as it sits right now, Alex Ovechkin for his career has played 1,470 games. Wow, he's closing in on 1,500. Gretzky for his career played 1,487. So okay. Ovechkin right now is playing in game number 1471. Theoretically, he can score in the next 16 games. He can score all the goals he needs to pass Gretzky. So he could theoretically do it in fewer games if he gets really hot here over this last little bit of the season. The Capitals have, I think they have like 20 games left this season. So theoretically, he could do it in fewer games and do it this season. And I think that would just be really cool.
There is nothing I want more. And the other thing, just to address more of the haters' bullshit comments they make, I don't want to hear this crap about, oh, well, he camps in the face-off circle. I don't give a shit because every goalie and every team in this league, and you and I have said this to each other before, knows that shot is coming and they still can't stop it. So I will not sit here and entertain this argument. Alex Ovechkin is the greatest goal scorer of all time, and there's nothing anybody on this planet can say to change my mind.
Yep, and it's not to take away from Gretz. I mean, he's still plus 520 for his career is hilarious.
Yeah.
2,857 points, obviously all the assists and the goals. But again, Ovi, if he turns up the heat, maybe a couple 2-goal games or hat tricks along the way here, he could theoretically do this in fewer games than Gretzky. So when it's all said and done, he'll end up playing more career games than Gretzky because he still has a year left on his deal. And I assume he does not plan to retire this season. Or he doesn't plan on retiring again, unless like the Caps win the Stanley Cup or something. Then maybe.
Oh yeah, that he's going out for sure.
But again, we could not pass up on giving Ovi his props. He's just continued to produce at such a high pace. He's got 31 goals this season. 48 points in how many games? And he's over a point a game at 39. I mean, you can't ask for much else.
Yeah.
But now we move our way to the Western Conference, and we'll start with the team that not only leads the Western Conference, but the entire National Hockey League. That's the Winnipeg Jets. They are 8-1-1 in their last 10 games. I know they've actually lost both their last 2 games, but they were on an absolute tear for a while there. And again, a team that's really well structured. Anything they add depth-wise will help them. But a team that probably really doesn't need to do much here because what they have right now has clearly worked.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. This team is absolutely lethal, and I'm not going to sit here and absolutely glaze Connor Hellebuck like I absolutely could.
I will. He's first in every major goaltending category in the league.
There's no argument here that Connor Hellebuck's best goalie in the league, and if you even try and argue that, stop watching hockey. Connor Hellebuck aside, this team is just an absolute unit, and I know I don't believe in jinxes, but at the same time, I don't want to jinx anything. But this has to be their year, and I mean, and it's part of it's hard to say it with how good Washington's been too. But if Connor Hellebuck just stays the way he has been, I don't think there's anybody that can beat them, man. I think this is the year.
Yeah, it almost feels like it has to be for this group.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is their one opportunity. I feel like if they don't do it this year, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, they do kind of have that magical aura to them, and that's why I almost like don't fuck with the roster chemistry at all, because whatever this team is, it's working. So it's definitely. It's just hard to think of anything they could do that would help. Obviously, you bring in any elite talent that'll theoretically help. But again, that team chemistry that they have right now is so good. They're getting production all over their lineup. And again, they're getting world-class goaltending from Connor Hellebuck. It's just unbelievable. 36-7-3, a 199 goals against average, a 927 save percentage, and 6 shutouts. All 4 of those are best in the National Hockey League. You cannot waste a season this good.
Right. I mean, you don't win the cup this year. Aside from your fan base, you let Connor Hellebuck down big time. So because he's there every time they need him to be. So I say for Winnipeg, you just stand fast at the trade deadline. There's no if it ain't broke, don't fix it, man. Could you always use a little more? Sure, but there's no reason for them to bring anything in or send anybody out right now. Don't touch it.
Yep, I'm with you. Let's move over to the Stars, who had a slow start to the year for sure, but have really, really turned it up now the last month or two. Jake Ottinger's got his groove back, 911 save percentage, 244 goals against average, 29, 13, and 12. His record is second best, only behind Connor Hellebuck. So he's really turned up the heat now. The Stars are starting to get a little more scoring. We talked earlier in the season about maybe the growing pains they'll have not having Pavelski in the lineup, but now Robertson's starting to get going for them. Hintz is going. You know, the team is looking more solidified. Obviously, they bring in Granlund and Cody Ceci to kind of add some depth to their lineup. I think Mikhail Granlund will really do well with that team, given how elite they already are. His role with the Sharks was as maximized as it could be because they had the young kids there that they kind of had to grow and nurture, so to speak. But now he can play a reduced role with the Stars where he doesn't have to even be the third best guy on the ice. And I think he'll really excel in this role with the Stars. It's kind of looking like the Wild might have a date with them in the playoffs, which I'm not looking forward to. But as far as it goes for Dallas, they're in a spot now where, again, they could potentially add a big name at the deadline and make the team even that much nastier. The group is already really good. They add a little defensive depth. They add some forward depth. They have a great goalie. This is one of the teams, and it scares me when I hear Elliot Friedman talk about, what if Rantanen ends up here? Well, if Rantanen ends up there, I can't turn on my TV for the rest of the season because I'm scared of what I might see. So yeah, this is a group that's in a spot where, again, as good as the Jets are, Dallas is now in a spot where if they keep playing this well, they're going to have home ice in the first round of the playoffs. A potentially favorable matchup with Minnesota, who cannot seem to beat them. If they go out and add any more elite scoring at the deadline here, buckle up because this could easily be their year too.
I hope that's not the case because I don't want, no offense to any of our fans that are Dallas fans, but I just don't want to see that. And I know, Brian, you being a Wild fan, that's the last thing you want to see.
Yeah.
But again, this is a dangerous team, and you have Jake Ottinger, who's one of the best goalies in the league, too. The guy, granted, he's 6'12", but still, he's an incredible goaltender.
And again, the Stars 7-2-1 in their last 10. They're playing extremely well, and they're doing it without Heiskanen right now. So they're going to get him back in time for the playoffs, and you're going to get a freshly rested Miro Heiskanen, and which will be nice because then he can jump in and play half hour a night, and he's going to be fresh as a daisy. So I really think this might be as good as the Jets and the Capitals are. This is a team that can really, really do some fucking damage to you if you're not ready, especially if they go out and add a big name at the deadline.
We'll keep an eye on it, but I'm not going to keep too close of an eye on it because I am not a Dallas fan.
All right, next team, Minnesota Wild. So the Wild had a really good start to the year, really franchise best start to the season, the first month and a half or so. Obviously, similar to last season, they've been riddled with injuries to some of their best players. They've gone stretches of time without Eriksson Ek and Brodin and Spurgeon, and most notably Kaprizov, who will likely be out until at least the end of March, but they plan to have him back before the end of the regular season. Now Brodin's week to week, Eriksson Ek's out for a little bit. So the Ryan Hartman just served for the last game of his suspension. So they've been without some of their best players for a while. So I know they've kind of spun their tires. They lost their footing in the standings a little bit, but they're still in a playoff spot. Obviously, it's been talked about at length, the salary cap challenges that they faced. And they're kind of in a spot now where they really can't do too much at the deadline. But the good thing for the Wild going forward is, look, they're going to get their big defensive prospect, Zev Buyam, from the University of Denver. Once his season's over, Denver might go out and win a national championship. We'll see. But again, he's a name that could potentially slot in with the Wild roster and bolster that defensive core even more. And the Wild have, when it's healthy, among the best defensive cores in the league. It's just a matter of they need their guys to be healthy. But obviously, the big household name on their back end is Brock Faber, who had a fantastic Four Nations tournament and has had a fantastic season and a start to his young career. But for the Wild, the big thing that kills them is the lack of scoring when Kaprizov's not in the lineup. I mean, obviously, he's one of the best scoring players in the league. He's an extremely gifted skater, sees the game like very few other players can. But when he's not in the lineup, if it's not Boldy and Rossi scoring, it seems that this team has a nightmare of a time trying to put the puck in the net, especially at even strength. So for Bill Guerin, if he goes into this deadline looking to add any pieces, he's got to find some scoring wingers because it can't just be Kirill Kaprizov. It can't just be him, or this team's going to get absolutely run over by whoever they play, especially if it's a team like Winnipeg or Dallas or Colorado. These guys, all three of those teams have horses that the Wild can't compete with unless they're 100% healthy. I mean, I know in the playoffs, the Wild have a history of knocking off the Avalanche, but they can't beat Dallas. They can't beat Winnipeg. So first of all, they need to be fully healthy, but Bill Guerin has got to go out. If he's going to make a move at the deadline, he's got to find an elite winger that he can bring in to bolster the scoring, because the Wild just can't hang with any of these teams unless Philip Gustafsson puts up a .950 save percentage every game. They simply will not beat these other teams, and because they have a history of not beating these other teams.
Yeah,
Are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I had to cough, and I don't think anybody wanted me to rupture their eardrums doing that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. This is one of those things where it's still the team is still kind of, as far as the trade deadline goes, you're still tied to those contracts from Suter and Parise.
Until July 1.
Yeah. So, but right now that's still
yeah.
Doesn't help them now.
I know. I'm just really looking forward to the summer. I can't fucking wait.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you're kind of limited to with what you can do at the trade deadline anyway. But I think if they end up playing Winnipeg, nobody's beating Winnipeg anyway. So if you're a Wild fan, just erase that from your head anyway, because I don't see how anybody can. And no offense to you or any Minnesota fan, but it's certainly not going to be the Wild if it's anybody.
Well, that's the thing. That the track record shows that they cannot beat Dallas and Winnipeg.
Right.
And
so
I just want to take a quick aside here, just because this bothers me as a Wild fan. I'll let you finish your point. I mentioned the lack of scoring issues. Here's a prime example. Matt Boldy and Marco Rossi have both played all 61 games that the Wild have played this season. Marco Rossi, 51 points. Matt Boldy, 52 points. Matt Boldy is tied with Kirill Kaprizov for the team lead with 52 points. Matt Boldy's played 61 games. Kirill Kaprizov has played 37. So when I talk about this team can't score, that is a prime example. Kirill is well over a point a game, and none of the rest of his teammates are even close. And that has to change. Sorry, continue what you were saying. I just had to say that.
Well, I think that ties into what I'm saying nicely, because you can't just rely on one guy to carry the team. And everybody's saying, well, look at Connor Hellebuck in Winnipeg. Well, Connor Hellebuck is just being a great goaltender. That team is still incredible. Whereas in Minnesota, you have Gus, who overall is a good goalie. But,
great goalie.
Yeah. I have no complaints there. But when the rest of the team is, I don't want to say playing like ass, because that's not the correct thing to say, but they're not performing to standard, it's not going to matter. Like, goaltending only gets you so far. If the rest of your team is playing like crap, it's not going to matter. And like you said, Kirill Kaprizov playing half the amount of games that Boldy played, and then they're tied for points on the team. That's horrendous.
Also, John Merrill having 1 goal in 50 games, while Philip Gustafson also has 1 goal.
Yeah.
But a lot of Wild fans love John Merrill. He's a great person. Let me just say, John Merrill's an outstanding person. He's a great humanitarian. He's just a great guy. He is a brutally awful defender, and I am so sick of the endless defense I've seen of this guy talking about he's a great defender. He has good games from time to time. He should not be in there. He should not be a top 6 defender on this team. And I think when Zeb Bouillon comes out from college, I think that'll no longer be the case. But Jesus Christ.
Well, and I can't go too in depth with that, because I'll be completely honest, I have no idea what the prospects look like for Minnesota. I have no idea what the Iowa Wild look like. I'll tell you right now, I couldn't name one person on the team.
The Iowa Wild are really bad, but ironically, the Wild, other than Jesper Wallstedt, who's their number 1 goalie prospect, their 2 best prospects don't actually play in their farm system. Zev Bouillon, their number 1 defensive prospect, who they just took in the draft last year, plays at the University of Denver, and their big forward prospect that they're really, really high on is Danila Yurov, who's playing in the KHL right now, who is, if all goes well, joining the team either at the end of this season or at the start of next season. But he's going to be a center for them. He looks to, if he plays here how he does in the KHL, I would assume he'll be paired with Kirill Kaprizov. They're both Russian. If he pans out, he's going to be their number 1 center going forward. But again, you don't know until he plays. And even still, that doesn't help the team right now. And we're talking about right now with the deadline. So for the Wild going forward, the big thing's going to be, can they add any kind of scoring touch? Because Marcus Johansson on the second line is not what I would call a scoring touch.
Yeah, man. Wow. You said that beautifully. We'll see. I mean, like I said, they don't have a ton of room to work with, and I think that's going to be their biggest obstacle.
Yep.
So
definitely. Let's move forward here. Now we just talked about the Wild. And now we're going to talk about the Colorado Avalanche, because that is, as much as we are a football show, we are also a Colorado Avalanche show. Apparently. So, but in this case, it is warranted. The Avalanche, again, slow start to the season, but that was because of the piss poor goaltending. Obviously, the Mackenzie Blackwood trade and the Wedgwood trade have helped the Avalanche right the ship in that department. So now they're, again, back to being one of the top dogs in the league. But, oh my goodness, as I pull this up, I just see an article from ESPN from a couple hours ago. It looks like Landeskog looks like they're pretty sure he's going to miss all of this season now, too. After they were pretty hopeful they'd get him back for the playoffs. Well, that's going to be something separate we'll have to talk about, and it's really too bad with Gabriel Landeskog. But we won't dwell on that yet, because there's nothing set in stone. But the Avalanche, again, move Rantanen out. They've since brought in Marty Necas, who's fit in pretty well there. Jack Drury. They brought in now Ryan Lindgren on the back end, and Jimmy Vesey as well. It seems like the Avalanche aren't thrilled with what they've gotten on their return out of Casey Middlestad. So, there's talks now, maybe do they try and go get a center at the deadline, or what can they do to bolster their roster? Again, this is one of the, on paper, among the best teams in the league, really, because Winnipeg's goaltending is so much better. It's hard to argue against them, but On paper, Colorado's really damn good. And I know some people argue they're a little bit of a one-line team as it sits at this exact moment, but with Nichushkin in the lineup, if he's playing well and when Middlestad's at the top of his game, obviously McKinnon's line is always going because he's so goddamn good. But on the back end, Taves, McCarr, obviously now they bring in Lindgren. This is a really deep group, and with Mackenzie Blackwood back there now, it's just hard to see them being a team that's going to be an easy out. And it looks like they may have to get in as a wild card if they can't catch Minnesota and Dallas. But again, a first round date with the Jets may bode well for them as it sure did last year. But also, again, one thing we missed with the Stars too, Matt Duchene having an incredible year with them. I can't believe how good he's been playing. But sorry, saying Avalanche, I just thought of Matt Duchene. But anyways, yeah, the Avalanche. It's really hard to see anybody that can go toe to toe with them except like Winnipeg or Dallas. So we'll see how it goes for the Avalanche. But again, they're really a team that I don't think needs to make many changes unless they think they can improve down the middle and maybe bump Casey Middlestad down a line. But other than that, man, this team's really damn good. I don't think they need to screw with this too much now.
Well, my whole thing is what do you bring in that's better than what you already have? Like,
correct. And they can't take Mikko Rantanen back because Rantanen was moved in a deal with retained salary, so he cannot rejoin the Avalanche this season. So that is a non-option for them. And really, unless they're one of the teams that wants to try and get in on Braden Shen to bolster their center depth. But again, St. Louis is trying to get back into the race. Do they think they can catch Colorado? You certainly don't want to trade your captain and one of your best players within the division. So do they want to even put themselves in a spot where that could happen? I mean, Shen would be a great fit there. Shen would be a great fit on any team, quite frankly. But I don't, that's not a move that the Blues probably would make. I'm sure Colorado would make a trade like that in a heartbeat. But so given what's out there for the Avalanche, it's just, do you even risk it, or do you go with the fact that you've been one of the best teams in the league since you got Mackenzie Blackwood and ride that all the way to the finish line?
I'm going to say the same thing I said earlier. We were talking about Winnipeg. What you're doing is working. Just don't stay where you are. Yeah, obviously there's always room for improvement, but don't ruin a good thing.
All right. I like it. So short and sweet, which normally is not the case with our Avalanche segments because usually it's complaining. But since they've gotten goaltending, it's all been rectified. It's been really great.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Yeah, I know, exactly. It's almost everybody in the universe was saying this. But, sometimes making these trades isn't like a video game either. It doesn't just happen overnight.
Right.
So sometimes it takes a while for the right thing to come together. And as much sense as the Blackwood trade made, I mean, who else really predicted that? Outside of maybe a select few people, nobody was like, oh, Blackwood, that's a perfect fit. Well, he's been a perfect fit.
Yep.
So I will say real quick too, I know Utah and St. Louis are in the race right now, so to speak, in this Central Division, but unless they get in a wild card spot, I don't envision that we'll see them in the playoffs. I think St. Louis doesn't quite have the dogs, and if they end up moving Shen, then they really are toast. But Utah, I just don't think is good enough. Again, with their goalie situation, not that their goalies are bad, but Vmelka and Ingram are both serviceable goalies. I just don't think they're quite there yet. I think they're very close, but I think when this is all said and done, they'll be on the outside looking in. So I don't want to jump too in depth with them, especially St. Louis, because there's just too much uncertainty there.
I'm with you on that, man. I don't want to see St. Louis in it anyway. So,
all right, the Pacific Division to wrap this trade deadline segment up. The Vegas Golden Knights, so they are leading the charge. Kind of had a little rough patch since the turn of the calendar year, but all in all, they're still first in the division. It looks like, they're going to be competing a little bit with Edmonton and LA, but it looks like this should be their division for the taking. Jack Eichel's had an outstanding year for Vegas. Mark Stone's had a great year for them. Pavel Dorofeev's had a really good year for them. I believe Shea Theodore's still on injured reserve for them, so that injury could hurt them, but I believe he's going to be back for the playoffs. I know Petro obviously has battled some injuries, so if Hayden Hill can be good, I think Vegas is as good as any team. I think he's going to be the biggest factor in their success, as I don't really see a scenario where anybody in their forward group or defensive core will give them problems. They just have so many good players, guys like Nick Hague too on the back end that just are great players that again helped them win their first championship couple seasons ago. Really, the biggest question mark will be, is Adin Hill going to be as elite as he was on their Stanley Cup run? Because if he is, this team forward group and defensive core is about as good as anybody.
Yeah, my thing is Vegas is always a threat, and they have been since day one in the league for them. And so I think if you're counting them out, especially right now, I think you're making a huge mistake. I say even if Adin Hill doesn't have his best stuff, I still think that they're not a team to mess with. I still think this is a team that's very capable of doing damage.
Yeah, I know. I think so. I think whoever they play in the first round is going to really, really have a bad time.
Oh, man.
Again, they're a team where I truly think they don't need to make any changes. They just need Adin Hill to be his very best in the playoffs, because forward and defensive core, they won with this exact group essentially, and now they're getting insanely good play from Pavel Dorofeev. Jack Eichel seems to only get better with each day, which is crazy. Mark Stone's having a really good year too. And again, if they can get William Karlsson back off IR, like, this is a team that's just unbelievable. So, and I know they don't have Marchessault now, but again, with guys like Dorofeev stepping up, you fill the void when you lose players of Marchessault's caliber. And so I think Vegas is a team that's as scary as any. They need Adin Hill to be Adin Hill.
Yeah, I agree with you. Sorry. You and I have been looking at a group chat the whole time. So
yes, we have. One of our friends is trying to decide on what jersey he wants to buy. He's a Nashville Predators fan, and he's going to the game Thursday, and the trade deadline's Friday. I'm like, oh God, don't buy one.
Just
of a player
wait.
that's been traded. Yeah,
yeah.
So, I mean, I get it though. Buying a jersey at the arena is always cool as hell to do. So I get it, but we just don't want him to make a decision and regret it within 24 hours.
Yeah.
So
I was like, well, my buddy bought a Patrick Kane Blackhawks jersey, and then like a month later he got traded. So, anyway, but back to Adin Hill. I agree. He does need to be on point for him. You want him to be on point, but I don't think it's the end of the world for Vegas if he's not. I still think they're an offensively strong enough team where they can outscore any goaltending issues they might run into down the road.
Only time will tell. Speaking of teams that like to outscore their goaltending issues, the Edmonton Oilers. Look, it's not the most perfectly constructed roster, but a couple things work to their advantage. First of all, they just went to the finals last year and were a couple of goals away from winning it all. But having Connor McDavid is the X factor that negates a lot of the problems they have. The defensive core leaves a little bit to be desired, and that's putting it generously. Stuart Skinner, unless he's on, is but again, they can outscore their problems when they get McDavid and Draisaitl going. It's hard to keep up with that. It's weird how mysterious this team is, but they've got that deep playoff experience. These guys know what it takes to win in the playoffs. So even though I don't think they're the perfect roster on paper, they weren't really last year either, and they still went all the way to the final. So I don't know what the right move for them is. Obviously, I think anybody would like to add more scoring and obviously bolster your defense, but again, they believe in the group that they have because they just went to the final last year, and it looks like they're pretty content with running it back with the similar team this year. So
right.
It's hard to disagree with what's worked in the past.
Right. And there's nothing with trying to run it back with the same team. So
especially when they're probably going to play LA in the first round for the fourth straight year and clobber them for the fourth straight year.
Yeah, you'll have that on those LA jobs. But I mean, now with Edmonton making it all the way to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final, now you have a team that can be taken seriously. And I feel like that should work in their favor at the trade deadline. I mean, should they want to pick somebody up, why would you not want to go to the Oilers, a team that was in the Stanley Cup final? You could play with Connor McDavid, for crying out loud. Why would you not want to do that?
Yep.
Not that you're going to be on his line, but I'm just saying.
And I know the Oilers have had a rough go of it lately too. And like, I think it was Friedge that was talking about, it hasn't worked well with Arvidsson there. So maybe he's a candidate. You move out and get him a change of scenery, potentially with another playoff contending team, ideally for the Oilers, a team that's not in their conference. So they would look out east, but I could see, and not that there's anything even remotely out there about this, but I could see Arvidsson being a good fit on a team like Carolina or even like Tampa Bay or the Panthers, teams that have gone far in the past. Adding a guy like Arvidsson, who, has played in the Stanley Cup final, has been part of some really good teams. You bring in a guy like that, it may be exactly what he needs to get going again, because it really hasn't worked with him in Edmonton. But it'll be fascinating to see how the Oilers look going forward. Again, a lot of it will depend on the health of Evander Kane. So I'll be interested to see what happens. But again, it looks like they're destined for a fourth straight matchup with the Kings in the first round, and the previous three have all gone their way. So time will tell. But again, I would not be surprised if the Oilers didn't do anything major at the deadline, because they were just in the final last year and they seem to like their group.
I still think their goaltending is not the answer for them right now.
I don't think so either, but I mean, what are their options? All the best goaltending options that are available seem to be in the Western Conference.
Yeah. So that is what it is.
All right. So the LA Kings, so we just dunked on them for a few minutes while talking about the Oilers, but the reality is that, look, they seem destined for a first round matchup with the Oilers. It has not gone their way the past few years. They seem to, again, similar to how Washington did, they seem to have benefited from the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. Darcy Kemper's been pretty damn good for them. Obviously, getting Doughty back from injury is huge for them. As far as any success they have, he's going to be right in the middle of that. When all the deep runs they had when they won their championships, Doughty was playing half an hour a night, and so they're going to need a lot from him and a lot from Kopitar. And they're not as young as they used to be, but they're still extremely skilled. Obviously, they're going to need big contributions from guys like Byfield and Kevin Fiala. I mean, they're going to really need a buy-in from the whole group here, because, again, they're going up against a team that they're most likely going to be going up against a team that they just can't seem to solve. And so, again, this time they'd be bringing better goaltending to the party, which will help them. But it's going to the burden's really going to be on their defensive core. Can they hang in there with one of Edmonton or Vegas, who I think they match up even worse against? So I think for LA, the big thing that they're going to need to do is probably see if they can bolster the defense, because those are both high flying offenses. Their forward group, I think, is good enough to hang in there. Not that they're better than those other teams, but again, with a core led by Kopitar, and you can get contributions from guys like Kevin Fiala and Philippe Deneau and Quinn Byfield. Like you have options. So I don't think they're desperate for help up front, but I think bolstering the back end will go a long way for a group that just can't afford a fourth straight first round exit.
And to that point, I think it doesn't matter if they do anything or not. If they're setting up for a date with Edmonton, they're making a first round exit no matter how bad they don't want to. I don't think there's anything they're going to do that's going to change that at this point.
And probably not. But again, realistically, their first round matchup again is either going to be it's most likely going to be with Edmonton, but the other options are Vegas, who, again, I think they match up even worse against. Or if they drop to a wild card spot, if Calgary can catch them, then you're looking at a matchup versus the Jets, who are going to probably annihilate whoever they play in the first round. So for LA, good. I think the best thing LA can do is weather the storm and try and add on defense. When they won their championships in 2012 and 2014, those championships were built off of shut down, go fuck yourself defensive schemes with great goaltending back when Jonathan Quick was in his prime. And Darcy Kemper, not the best goalie on the planet, but has won a Stanley Cup. He's got the ability to do it. He's had a really good year in net. Again, if LA can protect the fort in front of them, that might be the method to their success going forward, but they'll still have a challenging road. So we'll see how LA manages these tough waters ahead of them. But I'm excited to see if they do anything, because that was a crypto.com now, the crypto arena or whatever. That building gets rocking when the Kings are playing well. Those Kings championship runs were fun to watch. That crowd was lively. So we'll see what the Kings do. All right. So moving on. Last team I want to talk about in the conference is the Calgary Flames. Look, we could theoretically talk about the Canucks. I know they're not out of it really. I mean, they're tied with the Flames actually in the standings, tied in points and games played. But it really just seems like with how it's gone in Vancouver, the injury to Hughes and JT Miller leaving, it seems like the team's chemistry has kind of been destroyed. This situation with Pettersson is still kind of a mess with the team. It just kind of feels like their inevitable fall off is coming in. It may not. Maybe they'll catch up. They'll jump back in and snag a wild card spot. Who knows? But it really doesn't feel like the Canucks are going to be a team that's in the playoffs, which is weird given how they looked going into this season. But for what it's worth, if the Canucks are going to do anything, they're going to have to find some kind of good center to replace JT Miller. And I'll just leave it at that because that's where they're at right now. They're in a really rotten spot.
I agree that they're in a rotten spot. And I think the whole situation revolving around JT Miller and what was it, Pedersen, I believe.
Yeah.
I think that whole thing was fucking petty and was ridiculous.
But it happens. But now Miller seems to be much more content in New York. So,
and that's fine.
We'll leave the Canucks alone for now. Again, it just feels like there's an inevitable implosion coming. But the Flames, I want to talk about who it hasn't been great lately, 3-5-2 in their last 10, including 3 straight losses. But prior to this rough patch, a really great season, honestly. I mean, we pegged them to be one of the worst teams in the league this year, and just trying to get through this tough stretch of not really having any superstar performers, but as a team, they're playing pretty well, and they're getting outstanding goaltending from Dustin Wolf, who I really don't think is getting enough respect in the Calder race here. I was reading something last week, and it's killing me now that I don't remember what it was. It may have been even a video too. I don't remember if it was a video clip or an article or whatever, but it was talking about the Calder race, and it was showing Lane Hudson and Matvei Mishkov and Macklin Celebrini, which, for what it's worth, I think Macklin Celebrini is walking away with the Calder. But the fact that Dustin Wolf's not even getting even mentioned in some of these articles is mind blowing, because largely, if you look at what the Flames have done, as good as they have been playing pretty well as a team. The games have been pretty structured for them. I would say exceeding expectations just given the roster they had. But again, Dustin Wolf comes in. He's got a .913 save percentage this year, which is not otherworldly, but it's well above league average. He's a very young goalie, which to me makes that much more impressive. And I think he's a large part of the reason that the Flames even have a chance to get into the playoffs now. And so I think Dustin Wolf deserves a little more respect in this Calder race, although I don't think he's the one that deserves to win it per se. But man, is this kid criminally underrated, and I can't wait to see what he does going forward for the Flames. But for the Flames, what do you add to the team? Because going into this year, it seemed like a team that was kind of just treading water.
Well, and this goes back to what I said earlier about what are you going to bring in that's better than what you have. And obviously there's a lot of room for improvement here, but again, excuse me, sorry everybody. But again, they've been flowing really well, and I know it's mostly due to goaltending, but I don't see, they're not a destination hockey team. That's part of the problem that I see. First of all, is that who do you have that wants to go there? And I mean, I know in many trade situations you can send guys wherever you want, and hell with them if they don't like it. But I don't know. I don't know who you bring in this situation.
That is a good point you bring up. I mean, first of all, yes, Calgary, not really a destination spot. And quite frankly, if in my mind, if someone says you have to go play hockey in Alberta, I'm thinking Edmonton 100 immediately. I'm not even considering Calgary. And that's not to disrespect Calgary, but Edmonton is like, it's like a league of its own with as far as the fan experience, the volume in the building. And again, I don't want to take shots at Calgary here because that's a very lively building too, and the Flames are good. It's a very deep rooted fan base, very fun team to watch, but the aura that the Oilers bring is just so much different. And they have Connor McDavid, which makes it more exciting. But right. You're definitely right. It's not a destination spot. So these guys that have no trade clauses in their contracts, I can guarantee even the guys with modified no trade clauses that aren't full are probably having Calgary on their list of places they don't want to go. And fair or not, or nice or not, it doesn't matter. It's just reality. And so for the Flames, I'm sure they would love to add a guy like a Rantanen or a Braden Shen and Luke Shen, because a lot of teams want to try and go after both the Shen brothers. It just doesn't seem like a spot where it'll work. So for the Flames, unless they can make a big splash somehow at the deadline, Craig Conroy's got his work cut out for him. But it seems like any success they're going to have is going to solely rest on the shoulders of this young goalie.
And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's all the better for him as far as moving forward in his reputation. I think he deserves every bit of recognition he has, and the recognition that he hasn't been getting either. I do agree he should be at least being mentioned in the Calder race. I understand he's a goaltender, but nevertheless, that shouldn't affect it.
Yeah. I think it honestly, I think the fact that he's a goalie makes it that much more impressive because really
Correct.
you mentioned earlier it's hard for one guy to have that big an influence on the game outside of your Crosbys, McDavids, McKinnons. Goaltending is the one position that's kind of the exception to the rule there. I mean, you look at guys like Connor Hellebuck and Andrei Vasilevsky and Igor Shesterkin when he's on. Like you look at those guys and that they're the difference makers. And for Dustin Wolf at 23 years old to be dragging this, not dragging, but largely carrying this Flames team to a potential playoff berth it should be recognized. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I think it's indifferent because I think Celebrini's walking away with the Calder this year now that Mishkov has slowed down and Lane Hudson and the Habs have just been so bad. But Lane Hudson has had a pretty good year, but Celebrini's just been electric. And the only reason San Jose has been as bad as they are is because since they traded Blackwood, Alex Georgiev has just been unusable.
Good.
Hey.
Sorry.
So for the Sharks are a whole different story, but obviously they're not in playoff contention, so not going to really spend much time with them. We'll get to them at a later point, but for the Flames, again, I really think you don't. And we talked about it with the Jackets. You don't mortgage the future for something that you might not even get this year, as far as the playoff berth is concerned. You let it ride, and if you make it with the team that you have, great. And you never know what can happen once you get in. But I really think I think the Flames are in a spot where you just kind of got to stand pat, accept your fate, whatever it may be. But again, I think Dustin Wolf really needs some more nods for this Calder.
Well, and I agree with you, but again, I say stand pat where you are, and then if you have somewhat of a decent amount of success, build around that next season then. But kind of test the waters, see where you're at right now. With that being said, before we move on, we're going to take a quick break to let you hear about our friends over at XenoPucks, and then we'll come back and we'll finish out the show with the last couple of things we have. This is the Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast.
It's hockey season, and you're looking to work on your stick handling or maybe even your shot, but ice time just isn't an option for you right now. Luckily, our buddies over at XenoPucks have got you covered. They've developed an elite off-ice practice puck that, in addition to looking like the real thing, is the same size and weight as a regulation hockey puck to give you that authentic feel on the end of your stick. It works better than other off-ice practice pucks on almost any surface, whether you use it on hardwood, carpet, concrete, or even asphalt. XenoPucks glide like a real puck on ice. So if you're looking to improve your game without setting foot on the ice, head over to www.xenopucks.com and get yourself a puck. Check out their merch selection and be sure to follow them on Instagram at XenoPucks.
And we're back. So again, thanks as always to our friends over at XenoPucks for sponsoring our show. We very much appreciate it. Real quick, we have one question, but before we do, I added my show notes too. And this is just me being petty, but for the love of Christ, can we stop with Sean McDonough being the national broadcaster for the big games on ESPN? His energy level is just not high enough. His voice is not booming enough. He's not exciting enough. And it's not to take a dig at him. I know he's been in the business a long time. He's very well respected, but hockey is not his sport. It just isn't. Bob Wischusen, who it usually is right behind him as far as the pecking order for the big games, is a significantly better broadcaster. He calls hockey so much better. He follows the plays quicker. His goal calls are almost at like Doc Emmerich levels of excited as far as excitement's concerned. And so I really think he should be the number one guy. But watching the highlights from the Stadium Series, I was really, really let down with how poor of a job Sean McDonough did calling the game. And we talked about it last year during the Cup final, specifically Game 3, how bad Sean McDonough was. So look, I know he's well respected in ESPN, and I don't want to dig on the guy that's been in the biz and is a better commentator than I'm sure I could be. But this is just not a right fit. This is like as painful to watch as Jack Edwards last year with the Bruins was. I mean, this is just not acceptable.
Yeah. And
especially when you look at the TNT broadcast and Kenny Albert is putting on a fucking masterpiece every game.
Yeah, Sean McDonough is rough. And again, I don't want to just dig at the guy, but I struggled through the Stanley Cup final last year, especially with my team being in it. And
ironically, he did a great job in Game 7, but the
Game 7, yeah, he was excellent, but that was about it as far as those playoffs were concerned. I think it was Game 3 of the Stanley Cup final I could have called the game better than that. So
yeah, and maybe he was sick or dealing with something, but that was just unacceptable. He had the one real bad one in the first, or was it first or second round, Rangers and Hurricanes. He had a couple of really rotten calls in that one too. It's just it's hard because you don't want to dunk on the guy who's at the top, the pinnacle of sports commentating, but the results just aren't there. It's not fair to the commentators who are extremely good at this and deserve these shots. And again, I mentioned guys like Bob Shoes and the Brendan Burks, like Mike Monaco's, like a lot of these guys are extremely talented broadcasters. And for what it's worth, Sean McDonough is in other sports too, but the hockey is not his jam, and that's okay that it's not. But they got to get him off these broadcasts, especially when you have elite commentary talent behind him.
I'm right there with you, man.
All right. Well, instead of being mean, let's move on and talk about this. Or let's listen to this question we have.
All right. It's not really. It wasn't a viewer question or anything. It was something. My wife and I were at the Columbus Blue Jackets game last weekend against Blackhawks, and she brought up a good point. It was what I thought was a good question. And I should point out my wife's a very devoted hockey fan, and knows her shit. But everybody's got questions, and that's all right. But I thought it was very good. She asked, when these guys go for line changes and shit, and you see 20 guys on the ice at the same time, at what point is it too many men on the ice? And that's actually a really good question, mainly because too many men is such a discretionary call. I believe the exact rule states that your replacement has to be within 5 feet of the bench for you to be able to, I don't know if it's necessarily play the puck or for you to get off the bench, but I do know that neither of you are allowed to play the puck in that time frame, or else it's a too many men call.
Correct. I say a big part of it also depends on positioning of the puck and where the play is, because again, like if you're going off on a change and your replacement hops on, or your replacement's about to hop on and you stop to play the puck and ship it back the other way, you're going to get too many men on the ice. Or
right.
If you go for a change and your replacement hops on before and you're still 25 feet from the bench, you're probably going to get called. Or you're standing at the bench, but you haven't hopped over the boards yet, and your replacement's already over the boards and makes a play on the puck, probably get too many men on the ice. Again, it is, as you mentioned, it's a largely discretionary call, but generally speaking, the times it is called are usually pretty blatant. The refs, I feel like the one thing the refs do a good job of is giving these guys a little leeway with the line changes, sometimes a little too much. So you hear the benches barking at them, but I think there needs to be a little leeway with the line changes, given the breakneck pace the game happens at. These guys are skating to the bench at 20 miles an hour and then coming to a complete stop to hop over the board. So I definitely appreciate the little leeway they get. But yeah, usually the ones that end up being the penalties are the ones that are blatant, where, like I said, your replacement hops over the boards and you're 30 feet from the bench, or, you got knocked on your ass and you're just getting up, stuff like that. Or again, the puck comes by as you're going for a change, but you stop to play it and launch it back into the other end while your replacement's already on the ice. That's the kind of stuff that they're going to call. I mean, they want to make sure that you're not changing too early, but they're usually not out for blood looking to make sure you're making the perfect line change either.
Right. And it's not a super common penalty that gets called. So I'm overall, I think that's a great question to ask. And I think if it's, you don't watch hockey a lot, I think it's a good thing to learn.
Yeah.
So
probably one of the fewest called penalties in the game. The only one or two I could really think of that get called less than that are like face-off violations and goalies playing
sticking.
No, goalies playing the puck outside the trapezoid. I think I've only ever seen that called like 5 times ever.
I've only seen it twice that I can remember.
I've seen it. We saw it once in person at a Bruins and Blackhawks game we went to forever ago. Tuukka Rask played the puck outside the trapezoid and then threw an absolute fucking fit in front of the ref when he got called for it.
Yeah, when it was clear as day.
It was. In person, it was hard to tell, but when I watched the replay on TV, I'm like, dude, come on. Like, quit fucking bitching. But Tuukka was really good for having meltdowns like that.
Yeah, the other person
scored on off the ensuing face-off.
That's all right. But the other person I saw do it was Peter Mrazek when he was still on Detroit. And I believe it was actually in a playoff game, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's not one that happens a lot. Most goalies are pretty careful about that. But face-off violations, God, I can't think of the last time I saw one of those. I mean, those never get called.
Yeah, well, they're stupid anyway. So
yeah, that's a pretty hard penalty to take. That's like when you like a face-off violation. That's like when you push the puck away with your hand on a face-off, or if you I think now they changed the rule where if you get tossed out of the face-off twice on one face-off, I think you get a penalty. I don't know if it's a delay of game penalty or if it's a face-off violation, but they're pretty hard. It's a pretty hard penalty to take, which is why you never see them.
But that all brings me back to the whole thing with the referees, and that is drop the fucking puck.
Yeah, dude. Oh, that's
technically it's a lineman, but whatever.
Well, the only time the refs usually drops the puck is to start the game. I think is the only time you have to. I don't even know if they do it to start the second and third period. I think it's just to start the game.
Yeah. So, but that's the other thing. I'm sick of these officials just standing there for fucking 15 seconds holding the puck. Just skate up, drop the puck, get the hell out of the way.
Don Cherry used to bitch about linesmen and say there's a reason they're not referees or something to that effect. And he started making me laugh. So,
grapes.
Yeah, that was before he yelled "you people" on national television.
Yeah, that's before he became senile and went off the deep end. So
he was off the deep end for a while.
Well,
he was just hanging.
That's before he drowned in the deep end.
Let's be honest. He was incorrectly pronouncing names the last 20 years of his television career.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we've spent a lot of time insulting people that did nothing to deserve it on this show. I think we've covered about everything we needed to cover. Obviously, trade deadline coming up this Friday. Deadline is at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So it'll be exciting to see what comes of it. I'm hoping we get a deadline like last year where we get a couple of pretty big moves. Obviously, the big story last year was free agency, all the crazy shit that went down there. But I'm hoping we get some more splashes at the deadline here as we gear up for the playoffs. And I think next show maybe we'll do. You called the Panthers winning the Stanley Cup after the trade deadline last year. Maybe you'll have another magical pick after the trade deadline this year.
Probably not. I was just really on my high horse because my team was tearing it up. And so I predicted them to win the cup. Although I think anybody truly could have predicted that they were going to win it just with how good they were last year.
Yeah, they were a wagon. I mean, let's be honest, they're a wagon this year. Truthfully, they might be, honestly, if they keep playing as well as they have been, they might be my pick to win it this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see him run it back and win it back-to-back years. I obviously I'd be very ecstatic about that, but I feel like there's with how good Winnipeg is this year, I don't know, man. I feel like there's just other ways it could go.
Well, we did say that last year about the Jets, and boy, did that blow up in their face. I had the Jets and the Rangers in the final last year, and
boy, were you wrong.
Yeah, the Jets didn't make it out of the first round, and the Rangers got absolutely stomped in the conference final.
Yeah. Man, I am excited for playoff hockey again. I don't know that we'll see playoffs like we did last year, but man, dude, there's nothing like playoff hockey except Stadium Series hockey.
Dude, the 2014 playoffs to me are still probably the best I've ever seen, although last year's were really fucking good too.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but again, we'll have a little bit of a clearer picture to paint on our show this coming Sunday, and we will be back on Sunday now that Andrew's feeling better and life's back to normal a little bit more. We will be back to regular timing on Sunday, and hopefully for the very foreseeable future, we'll be back to just regularly doing Sunday shows because sometimes life gets in the way. I just want to say before we go to that you got your wonderful looking Stadium Series jersey in the background, plus your hoodie and hat that you're wearing. So those of you who check out our clips on TikTok, you'll see those. This episode won't air on YouTube as a video podcast, but
that jersey's cash money.
Yeah, it looks good. So and with that, I think we're all good. Next time we talk to you guys will be post trade deadline, and I can't wait because this is like Christmas time for hockey fans. I mean, we have a lot of Christmas times: trade deadline, playoffs, the final, free agency, opening night. We get a lot of Christmas times as hockey fans, but this is certainly a big one as far as gearing up for the playoffs. This really feels like the season hits its final chapter as we go towards the playoffs here. It also feels like the season has flown by completely, like at a breakneck speed. And that may be just because, I uprooted my life and moved 6 hours from home. And the first 3 months of the season of this hockey season, I was just my wife and I were just spending time getting our everything together in our new home. And Now I look up and it's March 3rd and we're a month and some change away from the playoffs. So here we go.
Well, that's all right. This is one of the best times of year if you're a hockey fan. So,
and we're going to enjoy it. So we will see you guys in a couple days. Enjoy the trade deadline and we'll talk to you soon.